Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I hope you all are doing well. Today I'm honored to be sitting with the Senior VP and the National Sales Manager. In other words, pretty big shot from Guidance, and he's visiting us at Miftaah, and we were planning to have this small conversation, and we decided that, you know what, why not have a conversation where others can also benefit from and take some lessons from. I know for me, for sure, we have people from all across the country when Miftaah travels and we go around, that one of the most common questions and one of the most common challenges that the community faces. Brother Hassan, first of all, assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh. Hope you're doing well. You're looking beautiful, you're looking ready to move, ready to flow. And I'm wearing blue too, but it's a different type of blue. We're getting it. But the idea that, going back to what I was saying, that when we travel around, regardless of, you know, we're in America, and even perhaps where people are on their religious journey or on their spiritual journey, the common questions have to do with relationships and finance. Because regardless of where a person is in that spiritual journey, they want to fit within the ethos of conforming to the Islamic ethics and rulings when it comes to their relationships and when it comes to their finance. And one of the challenges, and it's the most common conversation, but it's not the most commonly spoken about topic on platforms like Miftaah or others, where people can actually learn about it and where people can actually understand what it is and what is Islam's relationship with wealth and what is Islam's relationship with wealth creation and so on and so forth. So I think that's the from what I understand, that should be the feel for what we want to talk about today, inshallah. And we'll get into some nitty-gritty details and some technical things I hope that the audience can also benefit from. But the goal is for us to be able to understand where is wealth in Islam and how does Islam even see wealth. And maybe, Brother Hassan, we can just start with that if you feel comfortable with it, inshallah. Bismillah.
Absolutely. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Well, I first want to thank you for setting aside time to have this discussion. I think it's an important discussion 100%. For our Muslim Ummah. But one of the things that I think we have to step back from and understand very clearly is that Islam did not come to influence people's perception of wealth in the sense that it does not look down upon wealth. No, it doesn't want Muslims to not seek wealth. First, all the wealth that you can accumulate is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All the money in the world is really Allah's money, and this is how we should all see it. And as we aspire to create wealth for our families, for our children and our children's children, one of the most important things I think for us to connect to is the impact of wealth, the impact on the greater society. A successful Muslim economy, or an economy where
Muslims are successful.
Exactly. They essentially look at life in the sense that if we hoard our money, it doesn't benefit us. It actually hurts us as a community, as a Muslim Ummah. And so the accumulation of wealth should lead to the circulation of wealth. And that circulation of wealth will ultimately
benefit the entire community.
Benefit the entire community, and I would say bless that entire community with more wealth. It's now more of about a question of how do you generate wealth in a manner that pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah, so it's interesting, Islam did not come to change the perception of wealth, but it definitely came to change the perception of how to accumulate that wealth and how to spend the wealth. But it didn't come to change the perception of the wealth itself. So in all the narrations which speaks about, in a bit, it's Abdul Dinar or Abdul Dirham, there's narrations where Prophet speaks about wretched or lowly is a person who has become a slave of the dollar and become enslaved to wealth. That's in part to do with to be over infatuated by it, but B, also when you do when you do conform to that type of capitalism is God mentality, we're talking about earlier as well, then it doesn't matter how you get it. So ethics and values are primarily non-existent, because it's not the process, it's the outcome. Rather, in the Quran and also in our narration, our prophetic tradition, we find that Allah uses words like khair for wealth. It's good. The Prophet refers to the person of wealth, al-yadul ulya khayrun min yadis sufla, the person that is able to support, and that, of course, not only with wealth, but also psychological reserve and other blessings of theirs, but primarily through wealth, is definitely going to be preferred in the eyes of Allah than the person who doesn't have wealth. There's narrations where companions come to the Prophet ﷺ, the Muhajirun, and they say, Ya Rasulullah, like our friends and brothers and sisters from the Ansar, the helpers, they've lapped us because they've supported us in ways that we can't compensate. Like they've given us so much, and how are we going to catch up to them? And different narrations, Prophet teaches them different adhkar and kalimat, and then the companions were very intelligent and said, what if they learn it too, and they also recite Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, and so on. And the Prophet responded by saying, well, in that case, that's the fadl of Allah, that they were given that blessing. So we don't take an approach of perhaps what previous nations did, where, like, even in the Christian community, that la rahbaniyata fil Islam, that we're supposed to run away from it. Rather, we're supposed to be able to, whatever is given to us, وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ. Like the way Islam looks at wealth is what you were saying earlier, that if Allah gave it to you, then Allah also dictates how it's spent and how it's used. You see something earlier, like the cycle. Like, it's interesting that the entire concept of being in the Muslim ecosystem, and I use the word ecosystem because Prophet said, al-Muslimuna, al-Mu'minuna kal-jasad al-wahid. Like, believers are like one body. So if one part of the body hurts, ishtaka ra'suhu ishtaka kulla, like head is hurting, the whole body is hurting. And the opposite is also true. If one part of the body or one part of the community is doing well, it benefits the entire community because it's cyclical from everything. Well, Hussam, it's interesting where in our narration, in our tradition, we learn about that if we want ourselves to be supported, then the Prophet of Allah taught us, Inna Allah fi auni al-abdi ma kana abdu fi auni akhi. That if you want Allah's support to be with you, then you must also be supporting somewhere else. If you want to be forgiven, the Prophet of Allah taught us, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, irhamu turhamu. That if you're not forgiving, you won't be forgiven. You have to forgive to be forgiven. I want my sins to be hidden. وَمَنْ سَتَرَ عَيْبَ أَخِيهِ سَتَرَهُ اللَّهُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. You hide people's and conceal people's faults, Allah conceals your faults. And lastly, you want wealth to be given to you. مَا نَقَصَتْ مَالٌ مِّن صَدَقَةٍ. Right? Wealth will not depreciate through charity, which is a very different system. Right. But you have to have it to be able to give it. So I think for most of us in America, at least, Brother Hussam, in the Western world, we don't have to convince ourselves that wealth is good, because I think that's why majority of people move to this country, is because there's opportunities of earning halal wealth and also generating wealth for their families and their children and so on and so forth. I think the challenge becomes in how to do it in a way that doesn't compromise our faith, our ethics and values, because all of the narrations and all of all of our tradition that speaks about wealth, it speaks about either how you earn it and how you spend it. Right? Nothing about the actual wealth. So it'll talk about how certain types of sales are impermissible. Not just riba, right? We'll get to that as well. But even, for example, ihtikar. Prophet naha an najash. He prohibited us from outbidding someone just for the sake of bidding it. There's no, I'm not really intending to buy. I just want to
drive up the price,
which happens all the time in a capitalist system. There's a book called The Prophet as a Statesman. Non-Muslim wrote it. And in that book, they write that the Prophet was actually the first pure capitalist, where he let the market dictate the price, but just set boundaries. Right? Not boundaries in the sense of how much profit you can make, but boundaries to set how the market sets the price. So there's no najash. You can't drive up the price. There's no ihtikar, where you can't hoard and then to create the monopoly in it, which of course America also, a capitalist system will also say they're doing that, but we know that's very different. So that's how Islam speaks about wealth. So from your perspective, being in this field for, I'm guessing, 3 decades now, 2 decades?
Just over 2 decades.
Okay. I know you're young. I can tell you're very, but still, like you've been around for a long time, mashallah, in this field, which at that time wasn't actually a field. When you got in 2004, 2005, our community was very different. Yeah. You know, and our aspirations were also very different. In 2024, leading to 2025, and if you know, just in a little while, we've changed. Yep. You got in at a time where Islamic finance wasn't a common discussion. Neither was it something that perhaps people even were thinking about. We were thinking about survival. We were using different fatwas for A and B. So now where we are, do you first feel like Muslims, first we've agreed to the fact that Muslims are aspiring to create wealth because we're allowed to, and we're aspiring to it as long as it doesn't become our focus of life. Because that's also important, that we don't want to be infatuated by it, because the moment we become infatuated by it, it drives our entire purpose, and that's problematic. You know, hubbu dunya wa karahiyatul maut, like just this over infatuation and love for dunya. So now, since we've established wealth is cool, wanting to earn it is good, having it is good, it supports the community. Deen is a cyclical nature, right? From how to forgive someone to how to earn money. All of it is something which gives back. It's an ecosystem. So there's 2 questions that are left. The first one is, how do we go ahead and have a fair chance at it? And where do we start from? And how do we engage in it? And B is, how do we prove the cycle actually works for Muslims? Right? That's a secondary discussion I think we can have later. But maybe you can kick us off in the first question.
Well, I will say this. For the first question, pursuit of wealth, pursuit really of happiness, I think, in our lives, and kind of looking at it from a household perspective. As a household, you have all kinds of options in how you can grow your wealth. In the United States, you have access to the stock market, you have access to the sort of commerce, opening up a business, you have access to all kinds of vehicles, right? And so the how becomes a big deal, first of all. And permissible, unpermissible, of course, should be front and center. But what we do know is that homeownership is the biggest wealth creator for families over generations. Excuse me. And so you have for 6 generations Americans who have inherited real estate from prior generations that have increased in value tenfold in some cases. And that has helped those Americans
support their flow.
Absolutely. I mean, when you are inheriting a great-great-great-grandmother or great-great-grandfather's estate, the biggest thing you'll inherit is their actual real estate. So if that's been passed down, then you have what we call kind of a leg up against your peers. You have a leg up in the community, which is why we as an organization focus on homeownership first and foremost as an Islamic finance institution. That was sort of a no-brainer for us, in the sense that we wanted to enable and empower Muslim Americans to be able to achieve homeownership without compromising not one iota of our deen, of our faith, in the aspect of riba.
And if someone wants to argue, like, just I don't want to take you off your train of thought, so you can answer however you feel comfortable, or when you feel comfortable. No compromise in our faith, in our deen. How so? Like, how is it different? So? And that's pretty much like.
Well, you mentioned when I joined the organization, early 2003, and the organization was around only for about less than a year at that point.
Oh,
wow. If you really look at the turn of the century, in the year 2000, there were no options for American Muslims to buy a home without delving into riba, one way or another. I mean, you're going to, this is the biggest purchase you'll ever make in your life, and prepare yourself. You're about to be burdened with the highest amount of riba that you'll ever face in your life. So it was essentially something that scared you as a Muslim American. if you were practicing and you feared Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what was there for you as sort of a reassuring thought was this fatwa that was issued by an overseas scholar, a highly reputable one, Sheikh Qaradawi, that stated specifically for Western Muslims that if no option was available to you, that you were permitted through darura to buy a home using these conventional methods.
Home that is fair for your family, standard.
Correct. Your dwelling, where you plan to actually live and raise a family. Well, for many, they were still uneasy with that.
Of course. Yeah.
So, but others pursued homeownership that way. But what we had was a community that was fractured in a sense of engaging in this wealth creation through real estate. And if you really think about the opportunity loss for Muslims over decades and decades of just renting, it's the Muslim wealth was essentially being, or I would say exiting the community as quickly as it came to the community through rental payments on homes where they had to rent. The instability that comes from that is also great, because you didn't know when your landlord was going to say your lease is up and I actually need you to leave. And so when I joined the organization, I had stumbled upon this institution guidance that really took a very, very meticulous approach to creating a solution, not an overnight solution. This approach involved first a 3-year research and development phase that included 6 of the world's leading scholars in Islamic financial transaction laws, led by Mufti Muhammad Taqi Osmani as the chair of the Sharia Supervisory Board for the creation of this program. It involved 18 law firms amongst the U.S. housing industry. These are the law firms that oversee a lot of what happens legally in the housing industry. It involved Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae's legal divisions, which is the securitization of the mortgages in the United States. It involved a business unit, a business team that all worked together to create the solution, whatever that I led to the statement, uncompromising, right? But by design, very early on, the founders of this organization, which are Muslim businessmen, made it clear that we are designing something that should not have any compromises on the deen with relation to riba.
No trace of riba.
Both with our interactions with the consumer and with our interactions on the back end when we try to securitize this, create a sukuk for it, so to speak. Yeah. And so it was made clear, because at every turn you had lawyers who would say to you, it's just very easy for you to just become a bank. It's much easier for you just to go out and apply for a bank charter. You'll be able to create a subsidiary after you create the bank, and that subsidiary can function how you want. Licensing gets easier. Plus, you'll have a great revenue stream from the deposits that you'll have. The problem with that, of course, is you're now in it. You're part of the problem. You're not part of the solution.
Trying to provide a solution by being part of the problem.
Correct. And so that was a hard no for us. And even though it cost us a tremendous amount more in investment dollars, in time, in even our profit margins going into the first 8 to 10 years, we were not going to compromise on that. And so in that structuring of the program, which we'll get into a little bit later, it being a Musharaka Mutanaqqisa structure, all the way back to the organization itself and how it securitizes these mortgages, these Musharaka structured mortgages, all of it from A to Z had to be in accordance with what our scholars,
your Sharia advisory board was
advised us, that if you want to really go at this and you have the capital to go at this, in a very.
What was the biggest challenge of that? Was it the Sharia compliant process, or was it more like the finance model itself making sense to you guys?
Well, the biggest challenge, I would say, is if you wanted to do it this way, if you wanted to become an independent financial services company and go at it as a non-bank,
the way you guys,
you would require your margins are going to be thinner. You would require a lot of capital to keep you afloat, for a very long time, so that you can overcome that sort of economies of scale situation. And we had that, alhamdulillah. Our parent company is a private equity group made up of Muslims who believed in this, believed that the purpose behind this was to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala while also solving the problem for American Muslims.
I mean, it's put like, mashallah, guidance has been around for 21 years. You guys have, I can only imagine how many people have been saved from this system of riba because of the work that you guys are all doing. I mean, to be able to go to sleep at night knowing that we're hopefully a part of a solution that is protecting people from riba it's a huge relief.
Alhamdulillah. Because really, you only have two options in this space. You can either be a pure play and do what guidance has done, and it's not easy. Or you can go at it from a bank perspective and become a subsidiary of a bank. And what that tells you is that you're trying to do the right thing, but you've compromised on some really core principles. But the compromise comes in a very simple manner. The profit you may be generating, you're sharing with your parent company. Who is who? The problem. You're sharing the profits with the actual promoter, generator, and supporter of riba. The banking system, as we know it today in the United States, is a generator of riba like no other system in the history of civilization.
No, and we're talking about this before. I want you to explain it. So if you don't mind, just
so for those who understand, and you can Google it now. You can use ChatGPT to help you understand it. In fact, I did this to help explain it to my 11-year-old daughter because it's very complex. But it is fractional reserve banking. If you Google fractional reserve banking or use ChatGPT to help you understand it, and even ask ChatGPT to explain fractional reserve banking to a 10-year-old. And you want me to tell you what it said? It literally said to a 10-year-old how you explain it. If you have 10 cookies and you needed a place to store those 10 cookies, you go to a bank and you say, please store my 10 cookies. And the bank says, okay, great, we'd love to store them for you. What the bank has to do with those 10 cookies, and this is what they do with $10, is take 9 of those cookies and actually give them out or loan them out to people. Now they reserve 1 of the 10, but they will tell you that your 10 are always available if you want them. But if all the children went back to the bank and said, can I get my cookies back? I have my 10 cookies back? There's a problem. Because the bank, what it did, it created fictional cookies, which is the definition of riba. It's create something from nothing. And it's almost like the act of playing God on earth, where you are only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the power to create something from nothing. And yet here they are creating things, and not only creating something from nothing, but they are actually using lender agreements, the loan, which in our tradition, our faith, is a charitable act. Lending and borrowing of money is a charitable act. It's described that
100%. way. Yeah, it's a lot of people. It's a good point that you just made. Like a lot of people nowadays will ask, like, well, if I can't make a return off the loan, then how am I supposed to give a loan? And the answer to that is, well, you're not supposed to make a profit of a loan. Yeah, you can make it off partnerships and having
Correct.
a relationship of a profit sharing model. But if someone needs a loan for something specific where there is no potential of sukuk, I mean, technically, almost everything can have a potential of sukuk, if you know, of Islamic bonds. But if it had no potential of it, that's because qardan hasana is exactly that.
That's right.
That man yuqridullaha qardan hasana, that you're just giving someone a loan because
They're in
they
hardship.
need it, and then they're gonna give it back to you. You know,
Correct.
and that's qardan hasana, where you give it what Ibn Kathir rahimahullah he defines it as tibun nafs, where you give it with the goodness of your heart, bashashatul wajh, you give it with some excitement so the person doesn't feel burdened by it, and so on and so forth. But in a system like this where everyone is making that type of contract, you almost feel like you're in the anomaly if you're not making money off that loan. We're not talking about investment, we're just talking about straight up loans. Like, so going to your example that someone came and took the 9 cookies, and then they come back and they deposit their cookies, and then they give it to someone else. So at the end of it,
it's a cycle, I tell you. And so let's use real dollars. $1,000 by you deposited into a bank for safekeeping, because we don't want to keep it under our mattress because of the the risk involved. So the banks are supposed to be really just depository institutions. They're not meant to be creators of money. But fractional reserve banking concepts have made them creators of money.
Are all banks do all banks utilize fractional?
Absolutely.
In America.
In America, this is why we always talk about becoming an Islamic bank in America is impossible at this stage.
It's not like in Malaysia and Pakistan. You have Mizan Bank.
No, because that $1,000 where it's there for safekeeping turns into the following: 100 stays with the bank. The 900, the bank utilizes that your $900 to actually go and give out credit cards. This is where the credit card money comes from. It's your money. Personal loans that they sell. These are like products. They are literally selling these like product, like selling a car, selling a real commodity.
But nothing.
There's nothing.
Nothing there.
And car loans, the loans for cars, the loans for commercial property, the loans for everything come from the deposits that are sitting there, that are your deposits. Now think about it this way. What happens if they decide to issue a loan to a casino owner who wants to expand his casino operation? I wouldn't be okay with that. Those are that's you using my money to actually loan it out, but you're telling me it's good for me. It's good for me because you're going to share in the returns of that loan, which is riba. So number one, you're taking that dollar, the 900, and you're loaning it out to things that I don't agree with. Number one. Number two, you're charging interest to those who are borrowing it, and you're telling me that you're going to share some of those spoils with me, which I can't take because they're loans, because you're structuring them as loans. And going back to what our Deen tells us is the loan contract is sacred. It's something where people are in hardship. We need to step up and use that contract, and that contract is really
can be advantageous of a person's situation.
Someone who's in hardship who accepts a loan from you, that contract is one that protects them from your potential exploitation. And if we think back to Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam, Sayyidina Isa did one thing, and that was something really aggressive in a sense for his nature. He turned the moneylenders' tables in the old temple upside down and kicked them out of the temple. Why? Because they were using the lender agreement, the loan, to transact in trade and taking advantage. Now, what happens if somebody cannot repay a loan? In the conventional sense, then the lender goes after the borrower, after their other assets. And if those other assets don't add up to what is the amount owed,
with the interest that's
accruing, absolutely, they can. I mean, back in the old days, back in the days of slavery and such, you became an indentured servant to that person. You now have to work it off for
however long it takes.
And there, all of a sudden, is the gateway. It opens up a gateway to slavery, owning other human beings, and creating this sense of sort of, I can create things.
I can own things in ways
I can own and create. So it is a very, very slippery slope, which is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wages
war against riba. So in a system like in guidance, before that, it's really interesting that in the Makki period, you actually find, many of the verses that refer to the reasons of why the people of Makkah could not accept Islam was simply because of how they used their money. They were so accustomed to having a certain process of using their money, and it was so normal to them. So Allah says, for example, like فَذَلِكَ الَّذِي يَدُعُ الْيَتِيمِ وَلَا يَحُضُّ عَلَى طَعَامِ الْمِسْكِينِ. Like, we're talking about verses that talk about not to take the wealth of orphans. Like, can you be more vile? Can there be an act that is more vile and vicious and hideous than taking wealth from orphans, right? But that became the norm because now I'm serving the orphan. I should be able to take X amount from them, and so on and so forth. So in the Makki surahs, that became the reason why Allah highlights that a lot of the people of Mecca, or أَرَأَيْتَ الَّذِي يُكَذِّبُ بِالدِّينِ, you see that they can't accept deen. It's because they want to stay in the nature and the cycle of their in their ecosystem of finance, because that's how they stay. Like what you were saying, I can create, I can own, and I can generate, and so on and so forth. But to come back to that statement that you made, like, so in a normal conventional system, they come after your assets, your property, and so on and so forth, with the incurred interest, which obviously changes the whole cycle. But right before that as well, the exploitation of the borrower cannot happen in deen, but the actual contract also protects the lender.
That's right.
Because there's nothing that the Prophet ﷺ would pray janazah on anyone, but the one person that he would ask about before he prayed janazah, or the one deed, was, does this person have a loan? And until that loan is either forgiven or paid off, I can't. It's not my place, right? So it also shows that there was an understanding of, we're going to give you your money back. There's no way of me getting out of it. So both parties were protected. But so how would a system like guidance in the Musharaka system specifically of partnerships, if a person can't make their payments for an average listener and viewer, they may, like most people will say, it's the same thing. They'll come after your assets as well. So how would you differentiate the two?
So it all begins with that contract. That contract characterizes everything about the relationship and establishes us as co-owners with our customers in the home. So
by the way, for the audience, Musharaka means to be co-owners and a partner in an asset. So like the asset, the house has shares, and person A owns 70% of those shares, person B owns 30% of those shares, and the ultimate goal is the house owner is buying their shares back at a price that's obviously with the profit, because now the shares they accumulate and they grow in their value.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
In simple terms.
So in simple terms, if let's say somebody wants to purchase a home, and I'll use $100,000 as a very simple example, they've saved up $5,000 to go towards that purchase. Guidance would come in with $95,000. We would literally establish this Musharaka Mutanaqasa structure, this co-ownership commitment agreement. And this co-ownership commitment agreement stipulates that we're going to be 95% owners of this asset, and you're going to be 5%. And your obligation to us is simple: buy us out over a term that you select. And when you're buying us out, you're going to be given the exclusive use and enjoyment of 95% of the property that we own at that starting point. So you get to use it.
Because generally in the Musharaka, shared ownership also gives shared access.
You got it. Yeah. So we're giving up our access to that 95%, and we're saying, pay us a usage fee for that. We call it a profit rate. So we calculate a profit rate on that, and we charge. That's how we. Like
other people can also do an ijara system for that as well.
Yes.
Others have using a rental system for that profit share.
The ijara. So it is similar to rent, ijara, but we don't call it
You
rent
don't
for
call
a
it
reason, because we are not acting as landlords.
Got it. Yeah, and as partners.
That's important to note, because with an ijara or with a rent or a landlord,
Changes
the relationship. All of a sudden, I own the house if I am the landlord and you are the tenant.
100%.
You have zero ownership until maybe at the very end of the term, whatever it is. I could say I can convert your payments to a down payment to give you ownership, but you cannot do anything with the property. You cannot sell it. You can't do anything.
You have no power. You have no power of transaction.
Exactly. Yeah. So in this co-ownership commitment agreement of ours, it stipulates that you are buying shares from us every month. So every month, your ownership shares increase, our ownership decreases. And we actually, to establish ownership on the property, we create an LLC for every single home. We've created more LLCs on residences than any other institution probably in the United States. We've done over 40,000.
That's pretty much an LLC allows for the partnership model to be as real as you can get it.
Correct.
Because now both of you are part of that LLC.
Because our share is established, our 95% is
and
established.
Yours, other guys is 5.
And it's there's an LLC that's tied to us to tie the ownership to us, which makes us the real co-owners with you. Guidance is, and over time, that LLC shrinks. So the ownership actually is shrinking every single month while you are buying us out. At any time, our co-owners could buy us out. And if the value appreciated from $100,000 to $150,000, which real estate values increase over time. This is what generational wealth is all about when it comes to housing and real estate. All of the proceeds, all of the appreciation goes back to the consumer, not us. We don't make any profit off of the value of the property increasing. That's key.
That's a great distinction,
That's
actually.
key.
It's important
now,
distinction.
You had mentioned what happens if the co-owner, the customer, has challenges making payments. In case, let's take it all the way to default. So somebody is experiencing hardship, and we go through hardship plans. We have actual plans that can help people get through that period of time.
Either being laid off, whatever it may be.
Correct. So there's paperwork to fill out and go, and we did that throughout COVID, for example, the COVID period when people lost their jobs. So I'm going to go to the worst case scenario. So none of those hardship plans, forbearance plans, worked. Person still not able to buy us out as part of their obligation. So let's fast forward and say all of those plans expired. Worst case scenario. Well, at that point, your obligation to us is no longer being fulfilled. And so we have to, at some point, step in and say,
shares back.
Let's go ahead and liquidate this asset that's between us that you're not able to fulfill your obligation on. So we would then go to market and try to liquidate it, to sell it. If we get to that point where we have to sell the property, one of the biggest distinctions is we have what's called a non-recourse.
To that point, for average listeners, almost the same. They're probably going to foreclosure. Like, it's not, for an average person, it may seem similar. Of course, the shares model is the distinction. At the end of the day, that is what allows this to be
correct,
permissible in layman's terms, and the other to be haram. So just if you want to finish from
well, I will say that during the forbearance plan and during those periods of time,
different plans that you're giving out,
the banking industry would be charging you late fees.
Oh, wow.
Percentages. We're talking about a percentage of late fees.
And this won't.
No.
Wow.
So here's an interesting part. When we were structuring this program, when it came to the topic of late fees, the scholars asked us, what does it cost you when somebody does not make their payment? Hard costs. And so we didn't know. So we had to conduct a study. And so we went and hired a firm to actually give us an idea of what it's going to cost us to send a reminder letter and to have an actual department make a call. Because by law, you have to send a reminder letter and you have to make a call to remind the individual that they're late making their payment on time. So we looked at those hard costs, and it was about $50 in administrative, and even down to the stamp and the envelope, $50. So it became where our late fee is $50 just to offset our costs.
The actual cost.
The actual
the
cost.
hard cost.
That's it. To offset our actual, that's all we can do. The banking industry charges 5%. So I'll give you an example. On a $3,500 a month mortgage, that amount is $175. So
and it's compound too.
Then it compounds. So if you're late a second month, the $175 goes on to the $3,500 times 5%, and like that's how it grows. But it's profit.
So dangerous.
It's profit. The profit motive is there even when you experience hardship. That's the bottom line.
It's built in being the beneficiary of someone's hardship. Like literally, you're the beneficiary of someone being on their knees. Like, now let me see how much more I can get out of you.
Doesn't matter what's going on. I have to bake in profit when you're late making a payment. I have to bake in profit if you default. I have to bake in profit. And so there's something called recourse. So if you default with a conventional bank, and let's say $100,000 example again, okay? The house gets sold for a loss. Let's just say it's sold for $70,000 instead of $100,000. But now you owe the bank $90,000. Guess what happens? They have recourse. So what they can do is they can easily come after you for the difference, which is $20,000 plus the year or so of compounding late fees. This happened here in the United States in the mortgage crisis of 2007, 2008, where there was a record number of Americans who turned in their keys to the bank and said, I'm underwater, I can't even sell it, and I can't make the payments, take it. The banks didn't stop. The banks actually went to court, issued deficiency judgments against these poor souls who are now trying to rebuild their lives, and the deficiency judgments were served to them by a sheriff a year, 2 years, 4 years later, at wherever they were residing at the time, even across state lines, and they owed the 20 in this example, they owed whatever the difference was, plus years
of late fees,
which
is unprecedented.
And yet it was simple for the banks. It was
making the profit.
I'm sorry, I loaned them the money. I don't care what happened to them. I want my money back plus all my profits that I could have had. This is un-Islamic. This is haram. And so
this is also why people have to, I think it's important for everyone to understand when we say interest is like profit, that is actually a statement that was used pre-Islam. Like, it's the same. إنما البيع مثل الربا. Like it's all the same. Like, you're making a profit and you're making this profit, and you've just chosen to. And some people do that, by the way. Like, some people do just change terms. To make it seem like it's Islamified.
Yes.
We're not a religion of slogans. We're not a religion of chants. We're a religion of substance. Right? And chants and slogans, or optics and illusions, can delude minds, but you can't lie to yourself. Right. So at the end of the day, of course, everyone's making an attempt, but the idea though is they used to say that as well. إنما البيع مثل الربا. You're telling us that this thing is haram. This form of wealth generation and creation, but you're also making what you're doing. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had to stipulate an entire verse that spoke about أحل الله البيع وحرم الربا. We're not going into the details of riba from the Quran and riba from hadith, but the idea that there is a distinct difference between the two. So, in that distinct difference can be felt and seen at the most nuanced level, right? Not only at the difference of I'm buying something from you, you're selling. No, it's at the level of what you're referring to, like the shares. The idea of even liquidating the shares is done in a way that is not capitalizing and being advantageous of the person's situation.
Exactly.
Because that would be not only unethical, that would be extremely sinful. Because the whole goal of a believer is to lift the person back up. In Islamic system, you don't use we don't use someone's fall to benefit a system. You're actually using it to benefit them, because they were the ones that were part of it, that actually gave to it for so long. Now you have to build that person out. So that's where we stop. So the idea of it's not the same, right? No. Even though from the optics and whatever it may be. So when you liquidate that person's shares, they obviously take the benefit of the appreciating the value of the asset appreciating in the years that they had it as well. So that there could be there's some benefit, but to make it clear, that is the difference between a Musharaka system, because everyone shares risk and everyone shares profit based upon their shares.
There's two cornerstones of an Islamic financial structure that makes it Islamic: ownership and loss sharing, or you call it risk sharing.
Risk sharing. Yeah.
Those two are if they're
not there, then
if
it's
they're
not
not
Islamic.
there, then it's not structured Islamically, or in a way that would please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from our vantage point. And there's no way of getting around it. So we have real ownership in this actual property.
And you can really only have risk sharing because you have
got it.
Ownership.
That's exactly
together,
correct.
Right?
One leads to another. And so in the example of the default, well, we have to liquidate the property. That's all we have access to. What ties us together is the asset, our ownership in it. So in that example of $70,000, if it's sold for less, we would take a $20,000 loss while the customer just took a $10,000 loss.
Because you had more shares, obviously. Your risk is higher.
Exactly. So now here's something that no institution in the United States does. In the case, not of default, but in the case of natural disaster or eminent domain. So in this case, the trigger event was something out of our control. You are meeting your obligation. You absolutely are. But the home is destroyed due to a hurricane. And this has happened. But the insurance company, which you can hear now more and more in the news, that the insurance companies aren't paying up. But the insurance...
Those that have insurances.
The insurance company decides... your house is worth 70. They're going to cut you a check for 70.
But you bought
we had 90 in it, and we bought it at 100. You put 10,000 in, we put 90,000 in. But the insurance company believes it's 70. I'm sorry, that's all you're going to get from us. So the proceeds come to us 70,000. What do? Well, I'll tell you what we do. We take 70 and we divide it
in that same
pro rata. So 90% of 70 goes to us. 10%
goes back
of 70 goes to the consumer. Not one institution. Mufti Abdul Wahab
does this.
Why
would they?
Not even the so-called other Islamic home financing institutions. Why? Because their ownership dictates that goes
Does
against...
Does that happen?
That happened to guidance.
It happens at times where you actually end up getting...
We just had several hurricanes.
In Florida.
In the Gulf, in Florida. There was one big one that hit Texas, Houston. And that actually...
Harvey. Was it Harvey years ago?
Harvey. And
Harvey.
If you remember, many homes there were destroyed by floodwaters, even though they were not in a flood zone. So they actually never took out flood insurance.
Flood insurances.
And so their homeowners insurance couldn't pay what the home was originally worth. There was a shortfall. So this is real. This isn't theoretical. This happens. And happened to guidance, where we shared in the loss pro rata. Our contract says we will share in the loss pro rata. Look at any other contract, the lender agreements issued by banks, or the so-called Islamic structures issued by subsidiaries of banks, and you'll see some real interesting legal terms that have been manipulated to make it sound as if they were actually sharing. They don't. That again goes back to the cornerstone of Islamic finance. The contract, the structure means ownership and risk sharing. And we're the only institution that actually does this. In fact, to share a phrase by non-Muslims who have looked at our contract.
Would you say you have some percentage of non-Muslims that take guidance loans?
We do. We actually have
That's nice.
Non-Muslim clients.
Because if they saw it too, I would find that they'll be appealed by the idea of.
So the phrase from them is, I'm quoting, you guys have the most consumer-friendly home financing agreement in the nation. And we say to them, it's consumer-friendly because of the timeless values that anchors our decision-making. The core of the organization is the timeless values of our deen, of our mu'amalat. That's what drives us. Where in the actual Western economic system, the monetary policy, it's called neutral value. They have a value neutral core. Value neutral core means that their purpose is profits. That's what leads the way. If it's profitable, we got to get in it. And if we can't get in it, we'll deregulate it to get in it. So it's two different systems, you see. You were mentioning this earlier. One is the core cannot be corrupted. It's timeless values. One, it's a value neutral approach. It's what is best for our shareholders financially. It's what's best for our organization financially. And if we can maximize profits, however which way,
doesn't matter how we get there. So I mean, to be like for the sake of the conversation, I don't like our plan was not really to speak about trying to convince anyone or change anyone's minds about using guidance as an option, but I do believe it's a natural effect that if people realize like we want to create generational wealth, that's what we started with. We need to purchase homes.
Yeah.
And if you want to purchase homes, we don't want to be living in a place where actually potentially are not its interest. Yes. So I mean, at the end of the day, Allah is the judge and the ruler for all of us. So this is not to throw dirt on me or anyone else. It's just the idea of this is the facts of what we have in our beautiful deen. And exceptions can be made for anyone if Allah allows. But the general rule is this. And then when you want to create this generational wealth, we have an option, right? Yeah. And that option is not only an option that is just there, it's actually a better system for the person that is benefiting from it, right? Because in every mu'amala, it's called mu'amala. Both sides are doing something that is mutually agreed upon with ijab and qubul, with an offer and acceptance that benefits both sides, or else that's not even a mu'amala. That could be cheating people, that could be deceiving someone, and you all have been doing it for 21 years or longer than that, alhamdulillah. Any plans to do outside of home ownership, or is this where we're going to stop?
Well, no, as I mentioned earlier, this was really top of mind for us as an institution because we recognize that this is
the biggest
need, and housing, for example, in the United States, housing represents the most significant portion of the U.S. economy. Because it actually is a creator of the circulation of wealth that we talk about. When you buy a home, what happens? Not only are you creating generational wealth for your family, yes, absolutely, and your children's children, and you're keeping your money in your home. You're also spending on light bulbs. You're spending on paint. You're spending on
decor,
furniture. You're actually contributing to the economy. So it is a natural, and you want to beautify your home, and you want to beautify it inside and out. So you're doing things to maintain it. Plumbers, electricians. Think about all the
hits all the check boxes.
Absolutely, it creates jobs, right? And that's a great thing. That's a great thing from all perspectives. So for us, it was housing first for American Muslims, so they can be engaged, and pursue that generational wealth creation aspiration. There will be additional products.
Inshallah.
But we're a believer in doing things correctly.
Take your time with it.
And doing things correct. It's kind of I look at it as kind of the Warren Buffett approach. We're very conservative in the way we approach things. Our founder, our chairman, wouldn't have done this if it wasn't done correctly. And so the philosophy from sort of our ownership, our parent company, these are folks who want to do things correctly, where value is created without discarding our values.
Nice.
So
value is created without discarding
our values, our timeless values. And so you have things on the horizon.
Bismillah.
Inshallah. That guidance will be introduced into the community likely in 2025. But
and then the third question, we'll just wrap up with this, was all the idea that it becomes cyclical, that when someone does have a home now, it's easier to support institutions. It's easier to, give in ways that you feel comfortable, because now you have a space that is yours, or you at least own a large number of shares of it. Whereas a person doesn't have that, then the fear of giving can overwhelm them. And our system is built on charity, quite a bit of it, our non-profit sector. So if we have people that are able to give, that means we're able to produce more for our community, as in for us at least in Miftaah, students and professionals that go out and then they give back. So the whole cycle is built on in many ways on a person not loving money, because I want to be careful, but at least being comfortable at a point in their life where they're not worried about where they're going to live.
That's right.
And what they're going to and how they're going to live. And at a certain point, you have to own a home for that purpose, and it should be an option for you if you want it to be an option through halal means.
Absolutely.
Right? Why would we have to take on a sin for something which is in need? right? And especially where there are options now, alhamdulillah. So I think our responsibility as scholars, as students of knowledge, for us and as institutions, is we want to be a part of, we want to be able to provide people access and information to anything that can help their deen.
Yeah.
Right? For me, at the end of the day, there's no benefit in a relationship with guidance or any other organization outside of the fact that maybe you can sponsor events and so on and so forth. But the benefit is more people have access to understand. And I'm just being blunt, just for everyone to understand. The benefit is that people now have an understanding of what of halal and haram, and also a more clear. Like this was my goal today: a more clear understanding of the back end structure of it, without getting too technical. Because at the end of the day, there's certain things that you have to go ahead and read the contract yourself to understand with a lawyer or whoever is your advisor. But for the most part, I mean, I would hope that anyone that watches and views this and listens to it, this is an anomaly for us. We don't do that many podcasts, right? But I would really hope that they understand that deen is not just about praying and going for Hajj. It's an ecosystem. Everything connects, right? And how out of the questions that we are asked on the Day of Judgment, لا تزال قدم ابن آدم حتى يسأل عن خمس. Like we can't move from our spot until we're asked about 5 things. And amongst them, the 2 questions are عن ماله فيما اكتسب وفي منفقة. Like wealth and how they earned it and then how they spent it. And I think this conversation today, I would hope, not only piques the interest of people wanting to purchase homes, but those who are purchasing homes to pique their interest in using a system which benefits Muslims, right?
Yep.
A. Yep. B, I would also hope that it piques the interest of people to look deeper into our Islamic finance infrastructure, whether that's Musharaka of partnerships and sharing, or if that's murabaha, profit sharing, or if that's the different the ijara model of lending. And seeing that once upon a time the founders of guidance sat down and thought about this. Well, we have so many things that are out there now, crypto banking, this, that. So take a stab at it, and create the same opportunities for people. Now, how many employees does guidance have? You don't mind me asking?
We're close to 200 employees.
200 employees, right? Because Islam benefits. Al-dinu ya'lu. Al-dinu ya'lu. Ala inna kalimatullahi al-ulya. Like this is a set law for life. Whatever deen enters, it always elevates it. Right, so guidance has been elevated because of deen. It's not the opposite way. Similar to Miftaah, like it's not like we brought value to deen. Deen brought value to us. So there's a lot of youngsters out there that we see that are in the finance sector, and they're so talented. And that this is an opportunity for you to also see, like, hey, how can I use my talent and my skill set to bring the model of a Sharia compliant system of finance into our communities at other levels, whether that's small business loans or. Because that's also out there now. People, that's something that I'm sure even guidance is thinking about. But other youngsters, you brothers and sisters also. Once upon a time, the people that started guidance were just an equity firm, right? And then they used their talent and skill set to bring benefit to deen in us Muslims that now have an opportunity. How many homes, if you don't mind me asking, purchased through guidance?
We've helped over 40,000.
40,000. It's amazing.
I look at that and I think, really, I mean, mashallah,
Allah increase it.
If you look at the dollar value, we've provided over $10 billion in this structured method of financing.
Without a bank.
Without any bank money. And if you really think about what that did what has that done for the community? 10 billion. The homes are worth more than that. The appreciating value on those homes since each person closed,
of course, now
is more than that.
Now they can sell, they can do whatever they want.
Correct. And where does that go? When a Muslim has that kind of equity, they want to support things that align with their values.
100%, yeah.
So an Islamic school, the masjid down the street,
Miftaah Institute, all the other institutions are out there.
I mean, it's a blessing.
No, but your point is like that's what it does for us, 100%. One last thing, Brother Hassan, if you don't mind commenting on, what role does the Freddie Mac, Freddie May, like you were saying that it securitizes the loan. I think someone may be thinking just that part,
Sure.
a person may not understand. If you want to just explain it in layman's terms.
Yeah, so
ChatGPT style.
I know. I mentioned it earlier, actually, when I said we engaged them during that 3 years of research and development. We engaged their legal divisions. They're a crucial component to this method working. Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae are chartered by Congress. They are what called their GSCs, government-sponsored enterprises. The U.S. government, many, many years ago, in the late 60s and early 70s, knew that they're going to need a securitization vehicle to allow more liquidity to help the housing market. They knew there's not enough money sitting in the bank vaults to actually provide the financing for buyers to buy homes. So it was actually an ingenious idea. They created essentially a sukuk type, but they did it, unfortunately, for the wrong contract. What Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae do, they're not lenders of money.
Yeah.
They don't lend, they don't borrow. They actually are the ones that pool or take or purchase these mortgages from banks and from financing institutions. And what they do is they pool them into a security, a mortgage-backed security. That's what it's called, a mortgage-backed security. And they offer them to international investors, institutional investors. China, for example, their pension funds in China are buying into these. You'll have pension funds and other funds that actually
are investing in this.
Buy
the same
these
way they
securities.
invest in bonds or mutual funds.
So what they're looking at is returns, right? Because the U.S. economy is very strong, and Americans actually pay their bills. So the returns that are coming back are stable. Now, the problem is those returns that Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae is offering them are from mortgage loans. So we went to Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae and say, we're not producing loans. We're producing co-ownership contracts. They generate revenue. These revenues are from the usage fees that we collect on the customer using our portion of the property. And they said, wait, are you co-owning the properties with them? We said, absolutely we are. We're co-owning the properties through a co-ownership commitment agreement, and we want you to actually find us international investors for these so that we can liquidate our ownership, maintain the servicing rights. It's a little technical terms. So with every customer, they're always going to be dealing with guidance. We're always going to be the front and center of the agreement because it's our LLC on that property. But we're essentially sharing the revenue with investors who want to invest. So if $90,000 of our money is tied up into this house, we want to invite investors to invest $90,000, and we'll share with them the revenue. And so they looked at this and they said, sounds great, but you guys take on more risk. We're a little scared of the risk you're taking on. And so we said, you don't have to worry about the risk. We're going to shoulder the risk.
Because it's our ownership.
We're taking ownership. We have an LLC established for every single property. It actually even limits the excessive risk that might be involved because as co-owners, as you know, if somebody slips and falls in your house, right? They can sue you. Well, we didn't want them suing Guidance and suing all of Guidance's other consumers. So that LLC is a protection. It protects not only the investors and Guidance, but guess what? It actually protects our co-owners, our customers, the other way around as well. If Guidance gets sued, then it doesn't affect them. So we explained this to Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, and they agreed to move in this direction, which was monumental in a sense, that they were going to now participate in the Musharaka structured mortgages and issue them as securities for international investors to invest in. So this was complex by nature, and I know it's a complex topic for many of the viewers, but there is absolutely no borrowing or lending of money in that relationship on interest. There's no borrow. We don't borrow any money from Freddie Mac because Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae do not lend money.
Do not lend.
So we convince them to be investors, silent investors that create these securities.
They purchase the sukuk. They purchase pretty much the shares.
Exactly. They create a sukuk where they in the sukuk is our Musharaka mutanaqasa structured mortgages that have a revenue being generated each month.
And everyone benefits from it.
And then they offer it to investors. Now, tomorrow, we could start saying to the consumers, hey, do you want to invest in these Musharakas?
That was my next question. That's an amazing, long-term goal and vision, inshallah.
Well, maybe here sooner than you may think. So that will be something that will be available, inshallah. And so, and that was always the plan for many, many years. Just stability was a necessity for us, because for us, our risk is higher. We accept it. Our ability to fall back on anything, we don't have bank deposits to fall back on should something go wrong. So we wanted to stabilize the business properly and then move into those other products.
I think this was truly insightful. I learned so much and benefited. I'm sure everyone that's going to watch this, and those of you that are viewing this, inshallah, you're also able to benefit from this and start your journey as well. And I think anything in our deen that is doubtful, we try to find the right opportunities to find that which is not doubtful. It's one of our principles of deen is whatever is bainah mushtabihat, try to avoid it. And we do that with food. We do that with relationships and guidance, mashallah. And of course, all that you guys are doing provides that benefit. It fulfills the fard kifaya for us to be able to live in this country to a certain degree without having to worry about certain aspects that we would have had to worry about without it. Absolutely. May Allah give you guys more success. May Allah give your whatever aspirations you all have, allow them to be fulfilled with ease and afiyah. And inshallah, it's also cyclical that it benefits the entire community. May Allah give us istiqamah on our vision of making sure that we're providing value without discarding our values. I find that to be truly beautiful, because you want to add value without discarding your values. We're process-centric, not outcome-driven. Allah reward you, bless you, inshallah. Hopefully we're able to have Brother Hussam join us again, inshallah, when Guidance starts their next tier of products that inshallah you guys are helping us with. Jazakallah khair. Allah reward you, inshallah. Habibuna.
Barakallahu feekum. Thank you so much for all the work that you guys do. And we're so very proud of Miftaah. And I'll be honest, this is something that we've always dreamt of for decades, to see incredible institutes of knowledge not only be around and available, but to actually make the kind of impact that you guys have been making, and many more years of success, inshallah.
Ameen. Inshallah, reward all of you for watching, inshallah. We'll see you all very soon, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.